Peace, friends. Today I want to tell you a short story to illustrate that everything we need to learn, Mother Nature has to teach us. That every spiritual truth is reflected back to us in the natural world. And that the best way to come into contact with those truths is just to immerse ourselves in the natural world. Now, it's interesting that we distinguish when we say, I'm going for a walk in nature, as though that is something that is outside of us, right? And we look at the state of mental health in the world right now, mental health in cosmopolitan areas where people are experiencing higher rates of anxiety and depression, suicidality and drug addiction, meaninglessness, hopelessness, you name it. And so much of it, of course, is because we've become disconnected from nature. But the deeper underlying reason, I think, is because we've become disconnected from ourselves. We've created this illusion that somehow we are separate from nature, somehow we are not nature. And when we go for a walk in nature, we are immersing ourselves in a thing that is not us. But I think, and I've come to learn and believe that the reason why spending time with trees, hearing the birds singing, watching the water, sitting still, being on grass, feeling the earth, is because what we're actually doing is feeling ourselves. We're coming into contact with what we truly are. And I don't think it's an accident that when the Buddhists talk about your true nature or your innermost nature, it's the same word that we use because when we look deeply within ourselves, I find that we notice exactly the same things as what we find if we look deeply outside of ourselves into the natural world. The American transcendentalists were big proponents of this, right? All spiritual truths can be reflected back to us in the natural world. Highly encourage you pick up Emerson's essays, in particular Nature, and make it a regular practice, whether it's one time a week or every day if you can, to get outside and start to pay attention to what Mother Nature has to teach you. You don't need to buy more self-help books. You don't need to pay $5,000 to go on retreat. You don't need to pay however many dollars to do an 8-week course. You can do those things and they're all fine and good. But at the end of the day, my experience and my opinion, as somebody who's done a lot of those trainings, is that they're actually no better, if not just a watered down, diluted rendition of what the natural world has to teach us. It can teach us how to slow down. It can teach us about impermanence. It can teach us about interdependence. It can teach us to pay attention, to accept seasonality. All of these incredibly important lessons that we can only learn as we reconnect with nature or, as I mentioned, reconnect with ourselves. So I want to tell you a particular story about a lesson that Teacher Heron taught my son and I once upon a time. My son at the time was maybe 4 or 5 years old and was and still does do summer camps like many fortunate American children who can afford it in a beautiful outdoor setting at a place called Habitat Wildlife Preservation, which is one of the properties of the Mass Audubon Network, which if you haven't heard of it, I highly encourage you to check out. They do so much amazing conservation work, education work, childcare work, so it's worth checking out, maybe even making a donation if you can. I'm not sponsored by them. I just deeply believe in and appreciate what they're offering us. After picking him up from camp, we would often stick around, linger, go see the goats, feed the goats, walk around through the path and the trails. And one of these times we were walking by a pond, a little body of water called Turtle Pond. So called, I think, because dozens and dozens of turtles come out in the spring to sunbathe. It's really funny and beautiful. Now, my son and I were walking along the side of the water, and all of a sudden, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and I turned and saw just a majestic blue heron, maybe like 3 or 4 feet tall. Gives you some appreciation for what our dinosaur ancestors must have looked like, right? It's like 20 feet of a heron with this long neck and these sharp eyes and these legs that moved so quietly and with such stillness that they didn't even disrupt the water. They barely made waves as the heron was walking. And the reason I didn't notice it initially is because it was so still. It blended completely into its environment in my field of vision. Now, I told my son, I said, hey, let's sit, let's watch. And we ended up sitting and watching the heron for like 15 to 20 minutes. And what it did mostly was nothing. And in those 20 minutes, it taught me something very profound. As we watched it, the heron was completely immobile, it was completely still. And we watched it and we were looking at it and feeling the breeze and enjoying the natural setting. And after 5 to 8 minutes or so, faster than my eyes could perceive, the heron plunged in, plunged its beak, and pulled out a fish. And that was such a powerful lesson in meditative awareness that I'm still processing and integrating like years and years later. So, what this heron taught me in that moment is how to conserve our energy. And there's often this sense that a meditative mind is kind of a passive mind, right? It's just kind of sitting back, not really engaging with the world. But I think that what this heron was teaching us, what this heron was demonstrating, is exactly the quality of a meditative mind, right? A meditative mind is not sleepy, it's not withdrawn from the world. It's incredibly alert, it's incredibly attentive, it's incredibly still, so that when the time is right, it can strike. And what that heron taught me is how to conserve my energy. You know, the heron wanted to eat, the heron wanted gratification of an urge that it had, but it knew that to create noise, to add vibration, to move quickly, not only disrupted the environment and scared the fish away, but also expended its own energy in ways that are unnecessary. That's a reference point for me in my meditation practice that I keep going back to again and again. You know, like, what would Teacher Heron say? What would Teacher Heron do? And can we come to a place where we are so still, so quiet, so attentive with our energy, so respectful of our energy, that we can be present, that we can be present until the opportunity arises. Ah, the conversation needs to be had. Ah, the meal needs to be made. Oh, the person needs to be connected with. Oh, this moment needs intervening upon. Because I think that we struggle so much to do that, right? We're constantly in a state of reactivity. We're constantly in a state of moving forward. And it would be like the heron flapping around in the pond, hysterically shrieking. It would not only scare away all the fish, but it would also end up exhausted and really with nothing to show for it, with an empty belly. So the next time that you're trying to do your meditation practice, or even just having a meditative moment, right? Because so much of practice isn't just sitting with our legs crossed, looking very stern. You know, formal practice is incredibly important, but so much of practice is just noticing when those moments arise. One of my teachers, Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche, says, small moments many times. And those moments arise in moments of beauty or awe or connectedness, or we pause and our mind becomes quiet for a moment and we don't even notice it as we look at a beautiful tree or we hear a sound that surprises us. So the next time that one of those moments comes up out of nowhere, or the next time that it comes up during your formal sitting practice, take a lesson from Teacher Heron. See what it would be like to become so still in the environment of your mind as to become unnoticeable, as to become part of the environment. And when that happens, see what comes out in your mind. The fish, who are otherwise scared of the part of us that goes in, that tries to manipulate or do or take and package and present and make a podcast out of, notice when the mind, when the heron becomes still, what feels safe to come out to play. And what happens is that the waters become much more full. We begin to see our mind much more clearly, which means that then when a true idea comes, when a true inspiration appears, we can go in and we have the energy for it, and we have the reflex for it, and we have the patience and the attentiveness to go in and grab it. So this is just one of the lessons that Teacher Heron taught me. They continue to teach me every day as I see them gliding through the sky and walking through the waters. I am just so grateful for what the natural world has to teach us, and highly encourage you to really make it a priority. You know, there's a Zen proverb that says something like, if you can't practice 10 minutes a day, practice 20 minutes a day. If you are somebody who has a really hard time pausing the momentum of your life and getting out into the natural world to see what she has to teach you, you are the exact kind of person that should sign up to be front in line as one of her students. You are the first person who needs to be reminded of the importance of sitting on her lap, hearing her lessons that are spoken in a language that is not the language that we use to buy bread at the grocery store. It's the language of the birds, it's the language of the wind and the breeze, it's the language that speaks to a part of us that is so much more ancient, so much more primordial than the part of us up here that is formulating language and making meaning out of everything that it sees. And it's a language that fundamentally is so profoundly soothing. It's a language that helps us have a feeling of settling into ourselves that makes something like meditative experience even possible. You know, it's not an accident that the Buddha was sitting under a Bodhi tree. He was sitting in nature. It was an invitation from nature to come and connect with her wisdom. You know, it's not an accident that he touched the earth when he was being assaulted by fear and hatred and lust and all of these different things. All he did was touch the earth and say, I belong here. So I wanted to share that story. These videos are going to start to get a little bit shorter, as I said in my update, and they'll be a little more miscellaneous like this. Thank you so much for following along. I hope you have a beautiful day. Please consider sharing, restacking, becoming a monthly donator, or just commenting, showing me that you're a real person, that you're engaging, sharing your thoughts. Many blessings. May all beings enjoy happiness and its causes. May all beings be free from suffering and its causes. May this channel self-destruct.